Good evening. My name is Vinny Taylor, and first I'd like to give thanks and honor to God Almighty, who is Jesus Christ, the true God and eternal life. It says in 1 John 5:20. I'd like to thank and honor my mother. I'd like to thank my brothers and my sister, and shout out to her husband. I'd like to thank Apostle Pastor Gino Jennings, who is the man of God who has opened my eyes to falsehood. I'd like to thank the Truth of God family, First Church of our Lord Jesus Christ, TOG, the TOG. If anybody wants to know what God wants them to do, log on and experience the understanding and enlightenment of the Word of God coming from the man of God, Pastor Apostle Gino Jennings. I'd like to thank also Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, and his wife, Michelle Obama. Thank you. And I got the message, Mrs. Obama, in your Black Lives Matter video called Becoming. I got the message, and I thank you. You got to find the tools within yourself to feel visible and to be heard and to use your voice. Again, I thank you for that quotation. You got to find the tools within yourself to feel visible and to be heard and to use your voice. Thank you for that encouragement, Mrs. Obama. I'd like to read my presentation, but I represent the bond and the free, the maimed and the murdered, my ancestors who were brutally murdered, kidnapped, and enslaved, and brought on slave ships to America, to a land that was originally the Native Americans. But that land was stolen by the European settlers, and when they arrived on the land, they couldn't maintain the land, so they decided to take themselves up some forced labor and go into another continent and terrorize, enslave people, peaceful people, Black Africans, and brought them over to America, to a land that they had no idea existed, and they were made to work for free against their will for hundreds of years, 400 plus years of oppression and repression. So this presentation and my petitions is for reparations. Reparations for all Black Americans and Black people in general. It's an ongoing passion for me as well as others who have the same mind and the same ideal as I do, and have been diligently seeking reparations for years. So the time is now. I've written numerous letters and paid a lot of postage in the process to former President Barack Obama and his wife, as they already know. Both of them are Juris Doctors of Law, attorneys of law. I've also sent correspondence to many U.S. House of Representatives and Senators, to the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, to Senator Cory Booker, to Democratic Majority House Leader Chuck Schumer, to Senator Kamala Harris, to Representative John Lewis, and to the news media, NBC, CNN, the civil rights organizations, Black Lives Matter, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the NAACP. I received a couple of encouraging response letters from former President Barack Obama, and one of them is dated April 26, 2016, before he left office. Here is the letter it came in, envelope, as you can see. And this is the letter signed by him. Dear Mr. Vincent, thank you for writing. This is no denying that even with the significant progress we have made as a country over the past several decades, painful aspects of our nation's history continue to cast a long shadow with regard to race relationships and our communities. Important work still lies ahead, and we all have roles to play. Too many communities continue to battle chronic poverty, unemployment, isolation, and a basic lack of opportunity. These problems have consequences that reverberate through our society and the lives of individual families. It is up to each of us to lead in our communities and to ensure that all levels of government are working to revitalize our neighborhoods, improve our schools, and ensure that success in this country is only dependent on the dreams and will of our people, not the zip codes they are born into. By recognizing our common humanity and treating every person as important, we can make opportunity real for all Americans. We started the My Brother's Keeper initiative to address persistent opportunity gaps and tear down barriers that too often prevent our young people, including boys and young men of color, from realizing their full potential. Additionally, my task force on 21st century policing put forward 59 concrete recommendations on how we can build better trust and respect between communities and law enforcement officers, and we are engaged with cities and towns across America to encourage them to put these proposals into practice. This needs to be done. And we continue to fight to build a smarter, fairer, and more effective criminal justice system in our communities, courtrooms, and cell blocks. Solving these problems will take sustained effort from all of us, and they won't be fixed if we only pay attention when tragedy strikes. Change depends on our actions. Change depends on our actions, our attitudes, and the things we teach our children every day. If each of us makes an effort, no matter how hard it may sometimes seem, consequences can be stirred, consensus can be built, and change can be realized. Again, thank you for writing. There's nothing our country can't handle if we look squarely at the problem, and there is no greater form of patriotism than championing the belief that America is not yet finished and a brighter future lies ahead. I hope you will continue to commit both thought and action toward the solutions needed in your community. Sincerely, Barack Obama. I have another one that after I wrote and replied to that letter, a correspondence was sent to me July 13, 2016. That one was April 29, 2016. This is July 13, 2016. Dear Vincent, thank you for writing. We are living in a time of extraordinary change and possibility, and I appreciate your perspective. Through trial and triumph alike, America has always overcome challenges and emerged stronger because we've come together as one people. This progress depends on individuals like you who seize the responsibility of citizenship by speaking out on issues that matter to them. That is the spirit that built America, and together we can build a future of even greater opportunity and sincerity and security for generations to come. Thank you again for writing. I will keep messages like yours in mind, and I wish you all the best. Sincerely, Barack Obama. These are letters of encouragement that I received from former President Barack Obama, as you can see. I'd like to also add that in my correspondence to former President Barack Obama, it was about reparations. It was about, I touched on points with him concerning the possibility of obtaining reparations when the Democratic Party had voting control in both houses, the representatives or the representative and the Senate. They had voting domination in both houses. And he could have petitioned for reparations then, which was my argument. And I believe if he had done so when the Democrats had control of both houses, reparations for every Black American would have been granted for any amount of money that he would have asked for. I petitioned for $4 million per Black American citizen, plus 40 acres of land and a mule, which would have been, in this day and age, a tractor, a brand name tractor of the choice of any choice of the recipient, be it a John Deere or a Case tractor. I also requested for a combine, wheat and corn harvester, and a dump truck to catch the produce from the fields being harvested by the combine. In addition to that, I also requested that all Black Americans receive 4 years free college tuition, including books and housing, with the option to opt out for the value of the college tuition for cash, because some people who are advanced in age, possibly wouldn't have the aptitude to attend college at their older age or their golden years. So I requested that they have the option to exchange the value of the college tuition and or land, option B, for the cash value instead. And that's the letters of correspondence that I received in reply to my request for reparations. Letters of encouragement, but no real action came from it. And today, in this day and age, June 19, 2020, this year of 2020 is, and the years before then leading on up to this year has been horrific for Black people. Black people are being brutally killed, murdered by police officers and people who hold official duties, police officers, agents of authority. It just does not make any sense. But evil is not sensible. Wickedness is not sensible. There's no sense in evil. There's no sense in wickedness. It is just done out of malicious hatred. So with that, I am requesting reparations again. I've written numerous letters, 2015, 2016, 2017, revised in 2018, revised again in 2020. And I will continue to do so. until reparations is granted to all Black Americans in the form of money, monetary damages. So with that, I will continue to do so. And I've also written to representatives and senators, to the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, as I previously said, to Senator Cory Booker, to Democratic Majority House Leader Chuck Schumer, to Senator Kamala Harris, to then Vice President Joe Biden, to Congressman John Lewis, to Congresswoman Adama Adams, the news media, ABC, CNN, civil rights organizations, Black Lives Matter, and the NAACP, and the Southern Leadership Conference. I received, not getting off the track, but former President Barack Obama, as you know, had sent me those letters, did send me those letters before he left office, January 2017. A recompense to those who out there who are listening to this. A recompense means to make amends to somebody, someone, a body of people, a nation of people, for the loss or harm suffered. It is a compensation. And to compensate is to pay back, to make amends for all the wrongs or crimes and wrongs committed against them. All Black Americans deserve reparations, restitution, apology, compensation for all the malicious, heinous, wicked, evil crimes of kidnapping, slavery, rape, terrorism, murder, and genocide of the Black people. I'm addressing also the United Nations. Yes, you need to hear this. The United Nations in New York City. I petition to you, Congress in both houses, a president, the U.S. Supreme Court. I am petitioning to you right now. Racial profiling, which is another fancy word for racial hatred, racial injustice, prejudice against another race of people. This is still happening today against many peoples of color and ethnic financial backgrounds. Racial prejudice, discrimination, and degradation in America from hateful white America is constant criminal acts inflicted upon Black people. Today, there is Black people, again I say, Black people are being murdered, they being killed by police officers abusing their authority. Police brutality upon African Black Americans is a constant in this country and other countries. Against the humble, strong Black people who loves God and whose ancestors were kidnapped, brought in chains against their will, held captive, enslaved, stripped from their native land, native tongue, and language, stripped from their heritage and culture, chained in shackles, whipped, beaten, and killed for trying to flee themselves or escaped from the harsh torment. They jumped overboard the slave ships just to get away from the harsh torment. They jumped overboard, and the blood from the sharks that ate the bodies of the slaves that jumped overboard was so thick that the ships, there was a trail of blood behind the ships, and the sharks were right there all the time behind those slave ships waiting for their dinner, because they knew, for some reason, they knew that people were jumping overboard. And it was my ancestors. I am a descendant of slaves. The women and children abused, raped, and separated from their families. The men, women, and children shackled in chains, forced on slave ships, destined for the white colony settlements abroad. Yes, many of my ancestors who were on them slave ships were killed during their imprisonment. Some 200 million slaves were brought on those slave ships. And many of them died in the transport coming to North America and other European colonized settlements. Again, some 200 million African slaves were brutally tormented and died during their imprisonment and transport by slave ships to America and abroad. Those slave ships, images of those slave ships can be viewed on Wikipedia or any history channel, YouTube or PBS. And these slave ships were built strictly to transport people, enslaved people, and they were built to house people like sardines in a can. And these people, my ancestors, and the black people out there, your ancestors, were transported in these ships. And our people, our ancestors, could not use the bathroom. They were made to lay in their own bodily waste. I say again, they were forced to lay in their own bodily waste. I'm sorry to say, pee and poop. And if the women were on their flower of the month, which is their menstrual month, they were forced to lay in their blood coming from them and bodily waste. And they were so painfully tortured that it was so horrific to them that some, if not most of them, when they got the opportunity, jumped off those ships. They would rather die in the sea, eaten by the sharks, than live in that horror. But those that did survive the transport and arrived in America were auctioned on an auction block like cattle. Yes, many of my ancestors and those out there who are black Americans were imprisoned on those slave ships and were killed or had jumped overboard to escape the horrific torment on their way here to North America and in all the other European colonies which the slave ships arrived at, their destinations, which is Cuba, Trinidad, the Bahamas, the Virgin Islands, Jamaica, Hawaii, the West Indies, and even Australia. They were sold off as cattle to the members of Congress, the president, and those out there. Imagine, close your eyes and imagine you being terrorized, enslaved, shackled in chains, hauled off on a ship, made to lay in your own bodily waste. And when you did have the opportunity for freedom, you were sprayed with seawater, you jumped off the ship to get away from the torture and horror of slavery. It was Twilight Zone and Outer Limits times 1 million. Horrific, terrible, hell on earth. They could not go anywhere. They were stuck. And then arrived in a land that was stolen from the Indians to cultivate the land for people who was barbaric and too lazy to cultivate the land that they stole from the Indians in order to get rich for financial gain. And they did this to the black slaves who was once free. The information is documented in all the world's history books, including the legendary famous writer and author Alex Haley's Roots, the biography, and all the American and European history books in the U.S. Library of Congress. Most of them read that the Portuguese peoples were the first to start the African slave trade. Then the British, English, and Belgium, French, and Spanish peoples followed suit. It was the Belgium, however, the Portuguese, that started the slave trade. The English, French, and Spanish European peoples followed suit. And they also started the transatlantic slave trade. Altogether, it was the Belgium, Portuguese, English, French, and Spanish European peoples who initially started the transatlantic slave trade. In Belgium, they have libraries and museums that have shackles and all these horrific, oppressive tools and oppressive shackles and chains that they use to oppress and enslave African black people and brag about it. That's the thing. They brag about it. It's in their museums, and they relish on what Leopold II did in the Congo, cutting off black people's arms and legs and stealing their land and just doing the evilish, devilish things you could imagine. And yet none of them have received reparations from Belgium. So yes, they need to be accountable as well. And every state, including the British, English, and French, Spanish peoples, they need to be accountable for their sins because they participated in the transatlantic slave trade. I'd like to share with you a brief outline. I'll try to be brief and quick as possible. Again, I've been writing and sending letters to various people and the U.S. President, including members of Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court. Some time ago, I recall a former Democratic representative of Michigan, U.S. Congressman John Conyers, that's John Conyers, Conyers, who retired in 2017 and died October 27, 2019. And Sheila Jackson Lee first introduced Reparations Study Bill 40 in Congress since 1989 and championed for NCOBRA's Legislative Commission. In 2001, NCOBRA supported H.R. 40, which is another bill entitled Commission to Study Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. In 2008, the requested sum amount was $205,000. You can Google this, you can look this up on your phone, smartphone, and or books for your own personal reference. Again, they requested a sum, and this was in 2008, they requested a sum for the amount of $205,000 per black citizen in the United States, including seeking an apology from the entire white race. That was back then in 2008. H.R. 40, 116th, that's H.R. 40-116th Congress, 2019-2020, introduced in-house on 01/03/2019. That's January 3rd, 2019. Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, the descendants of slaves. This study has been going on far too long. It's time to act, and act now. Today, considering the perpetual discrimination and degradation and the ever more increasing high cost of living and false imprisonments and increased number of criminal deaths by law enforcement, we are requesting at best $3 million per Black American citizen. We've already witnessed the government has more than enough money to meet our request for said amount of $3 million per Black American citizen. $2 million being mid-range and $1.5 million being the least amount. $1 million would be under $1 million would be an insult. $3 million is for all the horror and pain and suffering and death of our ancestors on up to today. $3 million is not enough, but we'll accept it. Monetary damages to be awarded to all native-born Black Americans in the sum amount of $3 million apiece. There isn't enough money in the world that can pay for the crimes that was committed and still is being committed to this very day against all Black people and people of color. But America needs to recompense. They need to atone. They need to be accountable for their crimes against Black people. Can't just sweep it underneath the rug and forget about, oh, it's in the museums, oh, it's in the history books. No. Talk is cheap. It's time to pay up. Pay us what you owe us. America, pay us what you owe us. In the sum amount of $3 million apiece per Black American citizen from the ages of 18 to 125 years old for 10 generations. Plus 40 acres and a mule. In this present day, that would be 40 acres of government land and a John Deere or Case tractor with farming attachments, tools, and accessories. A wheat and corn harvester, combine and dump truck to catch the produce. 4 years, I say 4 years of free paid college tuition and books and housing included. Originally, the U.S. Congress promised our ancestors 40 acres and a mule as amends for the crimes of kidnapping, slavery, crimes of humanity they committed against them, but later reneged on their promises. The colonizers /settlers / Europeans also terrorized, whipped, and murdered Black people who wanted to learn or learned how to read. Education or self-education was forbidden under their so-called laws. And the U.S. Supreme Court created and upheld those laws. They created and upheld slavery. So the U.S. Supreme Court itself is guilty and needs to be accountable for the crimes of humanity against Black Americans. And in addition, if so desired, this is the options. If so desired, the value of the 40 acres of land can be exchanged for cash money instead, as I said previously. That goes for college too, because some of our land, some of our older brothers and sisters, of course, might be too advanced in age, lacking the aptitude to participate in college. And you can go to college no matter how old you are and still graduate. So it's all good. However, if there are ones who are older in age and feel like they don't have the drive or the aptitude to attend college and would want to instead work the land of 40 acres of land or turn it into a strip mall and a bunch of stores, a strip mall and a bunch of stores, and or develop the land for housing, they can also do that. So it would be wise if they wanted to, option out, if they want to keep the land or exchange the land or college for the value of cash instead, they can do that. And it's called option A. land, or option B, college, or option C, both, land and college, opt out, exchange for cash, for the money instead of whatever option they choose. The original requested sum was, like I said before, $4 million per Black American. That seems more like a reasonable amount to give to award every Black American. And that was the requested sum that I had sent to former President Barack Obama, and his wife also received a letter from me. I still have it. I don't think I have time enough to read it. It's only a one-page letter, and it explains it. It has all these points in it as well. $4 million total was the asking requested sum, with the options of, again, receiving a lump sum amount of $4 million or monthly payments. Just the money and nothing else. And $3 million was revised this year. $3 million per Black citizen is a reasonable number, again, to all the compared, this is in comparison. It could be $4 million, it can be $3 million, but compared to all of the millions of dollars Congress has already given out during the pandemic to today's farmers, especially to the relatives of the farmers and investors and silent partners who have nothing to do with farming but have received millions of dollars for just being an investor and or an outside silent partner or a relative who, a relative of the owner of the farm. All they have to do is go to an attorney and say, I'm the relative of the farm or the farmer who owns the farm, and they have received millions of dollars. And they don't even do any farming. And this is according to the May 3rd, 2020 CBS 60-minute news investigation. You can also Google it and look that up as well and view it at your leisure. It viewed on May 3rd, 2020 CBS 60 Minutes. There was a news investigation, and it quoted, "Why are hundreds of people in big cities receiving bailout money meant for farmers?" And it's all because, due to a Republican tax loophole in legislation created by U.S. Republican senators, implemented for their benefit and those affiliated with the farming industry, individual, personal, state, and farm investors. My point, if the U.S. government can give away millions of dollars to folks who are non-farmers and millions of dollars to the hospitality industry and big businesses who have built their businesses from slave labor, from the backs of slaves, the government has ample supply of funds to award reparations to all Black Americans or Black people in general. This can be done using the same benefits disbursement template or process previously used to send out emergency funds during this pandemic to the American people and businesses across the country. The money can also be distributed through, for example, a benefits disbursement card like Direct Express or Comerica or Transamerica Bank debit card / MasterCard or Visa, like how Social Security or tribal Native American recipients of reparations receive their benefits today. In addition to our request, we have always been an endangered species. We request for a special law to be immediately passed and implemented as the law of the land. For all you protesters out there, all the soldiers out there protesting on the bricks, on the pavement, This is where you should concentrate your intelligence forces. This is what you need to focus on getting past. Laws to be immediately passed and implemented as the law of the land. It's federal. You can go state as well. Black people are an endangered people, and if any African American, Black American, or person of color is physically, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and or verbally abused, terrorized, and or murdered in cold blood by any law enforcement officer or agent or any person who holds an oath of official duties or employed in a correctional institution who violates said laws will pay a mandatory penalty fine of $1 million to the victim if they live. And if not living, because of the heinous murder of the victim, the $1 million fine will go to the victim's spouse or next of kin. Furthermore, the law enforcement officer or officers charged with said crime or crimes will go to prison for a very, very long time. Furthermore, the police department and the city and state of said department where the police officers work or operate from will automatically award the victim and or victim's family the sum amount of $40 million. Let me say it again. Furthermore, the police department and the city and state of said department will automatically award the victim and or victim's family the sum amount of $40 million. Period. This new law will deter and stop police brutality, misconduct, and the killing of Black people and people of color in America, and hopefully in other countries. Period. The new law will stop the abuse of authority of all law enforcement agents and officers and court officers and judges everywhere. And this goes up from law enforcement agents, officers, and court judges and prosecutors and governors, and even on up to at the FBI, it's included, even the president. Furthermore, for every Black person killed in cold blood or illegally jailed or imprisoned, when released from false imprisonment, they will receive an automatic $40 million in monetary damages. Let me repeat that. For every Black person killed in cold blood or illegally jailed or imprisoned, when released from false imprisonment, they will receive an automatic $40 million in monetary damages. That means the state government can't, deny that. They don't have to go to court and file a civil suit, none of that. It has to be on the books, but they don't have to go through all the red tape that former inmates, when they are released from false imprisonment, have to go through to get a compensation for wrongfully being imprisoned. So they will automatically receive $40 million in monetary damages and $20 million in punitive damages. The amount of monetary damages can be amended from $40 million to $30 million being the least amount. $30 million being the least amount. This new law implemented right away will altogether deter and stop the police brutality, misconduct, and killings, and murder, and modern-day lynchings, and perpetual genocide of African American Black people. We see that we are still being considered chattel. We see how the Fugitive Slave Act has been modified in words, but still is being used. How the Dred Scott decision was never really reversed. that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the Constitution did not liberate us, that in fact in social reality they only legalized slavery and expanded the Dred Scott decision to include Indians, Spanish-speaking, and poor white people. Article 1, Section 2, third paragraph, where it reads, those bound by service for a term of years, that's slavery, and excluding Indians, Native Americans, not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons, people of color, black people, that's black people. All of those need to be removed. All of those amendments need to be removed. All of those clauses need to be removed. And the 1793 Article 4, Section 2, third chapter, or third paragraph, or clause, the Fugitive Slave Act, needs to be removed. The amended version of that clause in the 13th Amendment needs to be removed. Reparations and new civil rights legislation, laws, including the removal of the old modified slavery amendments, need to be our main focus for achieving justice and peace. It needs to be our main focus for justice and peace. Reparations, I say again, reparations in the form of money and new civil rights legislation, including the removal of the old modified slavery amendments, need to be our main focus for achieving justice and peace. You say you want justice and peace? Well, this is how you achieve it. This is how you obtain it. Real justice and real peace is obtained by reparations, monetary damages, money, and the removal of the old modified slavery amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the Dred Scott clause, where if a bound person, a slave, my ancestor, would run from a slave state into a free state, and then all of a sudden he gets apprehended, the judges of that state release him back into the slave trader's hands or the slave master's authority. That clause is still in there.